everyone. This is Dr. Nicole Quinn, and I'm here with Dr. Arun Sharma, co-host of the STEMCELL podcast. Welcome to the Lab Coats in Life podcast, where we help scientists thrive. The Lab Coats in Life podcast is brought to you by STEMCELL Technologies, a global biotechnology company supporting life sciences research and fostering communication and collaboration in science. If you enjoy the Lab Coats in Life podcast, rate us and leave a review. You can also suggest ideas or recommend guests for new episodes. Today, we have Tamara Poles on the podcast to talk about communicating scientific research. Tamara is the founder and CEO of Universal SciCom, a global leader in science communication and strategic consulting for STEM professionals and organizations. With a background in biology and informal education, Tamara has earned international recognition for her ability to make complex scientific concepts accessible and engaging. But before we get to that, would you like to organize a journal club but aren't sure where to start? Visit www.stemcell.com/journal club to find free downloadable checklists and templates, including an attendance sheet, preparation checklist, presenter evaluation form template, and more.
Welcome, Tamara. Great to have you here on the show, from one Durham, North Carolina resident to another. I'm not going to say go Tar Heels. I'm going to say go Blue Devils, of course.
That's fair.
So yeah, let's get things started. So some big picture questions, just a little bit about you, a little bit about your background to help help orient our listeners. So what first sparked your interest in science communication, this field that, of course, we know and love here on the various podcasts of the STEMCELL Technologies podcast network here? What sparked your interest in science communication? Could you actually walk through the founding of Universal SciCom and maybe a little bit about how you got here in terms of your path to this process?
Yeah, of course. And first off, I want to say thank you so much for having me on. This is an amazing experience, and I'm really excited to be here. So I want to say thank you, and thank you so much for the awesome introduction as well. And as for your question, how much time do you have? So my background is was in bench science. So I went to undergrad at a small private school where they treated us like PhD students. We had to go through, we had to work in a lab, we had to do all of the things as though we were getting a PhD, but it was still undergrad. And that's where my interest in science communication was sparked. However, this was before science communication was a thing. So, and I remember the day that it happened. So I used to work in different labs in undergrad, just for like extra credit. And also it was fun. I really liked being a bench scientist. But yeah, when I went to a professor's lab, and I was a junior at the time, and I remember asking him what he did in his lab, and he waxed poetically for like 45 minutes about what he did for a living. And I'm a junior, right? So I'm supposed to be knowing the words that he is saying and being right there with him. I I didn't understand a word he said. I remember thinking to myself, okay, Tamara, you have to ask him a question about his research. He just talked about it for so long. You don't want to be disrespectful. Ask him a smart question. And the only thing I could think of, because I didn't understand a word he said, was, can this be found? And I thought that that was like brilliant, because I didn't have to say what this was. And it was a question that was still engaging. So, and then he got excited and he was like, oh, well, good question. I've been actually finding these in intestinal regions of a lot of my mammals. And I was like, wait, what? You're like in the intestines? And he was like, yes. And I was like, wait, so you study poop? And he was like, yes, that's what we study. And I was like, why didn't you start with that? Now I'm interested. So keep going. So, but that moment, I will never forget how I felt, because I was like, all you had to do was say that. And I was like, why don't we talk like this to people? And then after I graduated from college, I wanted to take a year off before I entered a PhD program in evolutionary biology. And in that year off, I got a job at the Virginia Museum of Natural History, and I was the nature and outdoors education manager there. And I found this world of fun engagement, where my job was to create to provide nature and outdoor educational programs, events, and festivals for the Martinsville and Henry County area. But in doing so, I got to engage with the public and do awesome events and do these like smaller programs for families or K 12. And what I did was I started talking to the researchers and bringing the researchers into these events and bringing school groups into the research labs. So I wanted to share that knowledge with the research staff and let people see how cool research is and that what they're doing is improving like the Martinsville and Hume County area and like it's happening right in their backyard. And doing that, that was the first taste of doing science communication. But once again, I didn't know that that was a field. And then after that, I worked at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, where I was the coordinator of virtual education. My job was to provide a museum experience for people that were unable to attend the museum. So pediatric hospitals, people in different countries, different states, Title I schools. And it was before doing all this Zoom stuff was cool. And that was where I created a program called the SMARTS program, which was stood for Scientists Making Answers Relevant for Teachers and Students. And what I did was I would wheel my carts into the labs and I would train up the scientists to be able to talk to middle school and high school students about their research. So this middle school and high school students got to see a real researcher, and a lot of times it was a researcher that was not like what they would anticipate. Because a lot of kids, even now, still think scientists are old white guys with crazy white hair, and they're like, "Well, I can't be that because I'm not an old white guy with crazy white hair." And I'm like, "Well, I'm a black woman with nice hair, so with natural hair." So I can, and I'm a scientist, so I wanted to start breaking down those misconceptions. So that was me really getting my feet wet with that program. And I also started some other programs there, like the Teen TV program, where I taught teens how to communicate science to their peers using digital technology. But I took all of those skills, mainly the SMARTS program skills, and just applied it and went to grad school. And I was like, this is actually what I really want to do. So while working, went to grad school, got my degrees in education with a concentration in curriculum and instruction. And then during that time, Moorhead Planetarium and Science Center hired me to start the first statewide science communication training program. So I was like, all right, we're doing this. I started the first statewide science communication training program, and there I trained 100 scientists a year, and it was an intense training. So once I did all of that, and then I ended up getting another job working with scientists. So the reason why I started Universal SciCom is that there was a void. What does it mean to be a liaison between scientists and general public? Because that is what I kept calling it at the time. Universal SciCom is the one-stop shop for all things science communication. If you want to learn it, you can hit the Learn tab, and I provide workshops and trainings and consultations. And also, I have other experts that are involved in this too, that are experts in science communication and research. So if you have specific questions, say about conservation or something that is a little bit out of my bailiwick, guess what? I have a researcher that I will connect you with, and you could have consultations through them, or they do workshops as well. So you can learn it. I have a Do It tab. So if you're a researcher that wants to go out and engage with the community, like maybe partner with your local museums or science centers, or go to an event and really share your enthusiasm for science, guess what? You can come here, and I can help connect you with that with those communities. And there's an Experience SciCom tab as well. So if you are somebody that's curious, that wants to see SciCom in action, or if you're just somebody that's not a researcher at all and you're just like, I really like nerdy events or science related events. It is a lot of fun. And so that's why I created Universal SciCom, is because I want people to go to one spot and be able to learn SciCom, experience SciCom, and also do it and not have to do too much Googling.
That's a great introduction. Okay, I want to ask you a bit of, I think it's a timely question given what we're all witnessing and experiencing with the scientific and political climate, particularly in the US right now, which is really what I think the answer to this is clear, but I want to sort of talk about the cost of poor communication in science and really the trust gap that that creates, and how scientists and science communicators can kind of address that. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that, and what is your maybe best advice?
So that was a multi-part question, but your first question, which was about the importance of science communication. We see it. We see it right now. We have people voting against their interests and their health because they may not be clear on how the scientific process takes place. And it's because that's been a disconnect. It's always, well, I won't say it's always been, but there has been an environment that has been created that is an us and them, and a ivory tower type of situation that we've created for ourselves. And the importance of science communication is to break down that ivory tower and that us and them. And I actually have a whole workshop about this, and it's called the power of authenticity in science communication. And what I teach is making sure that scientists know that, one, language is a barrier. If you use jargon, that's a barrier. That is dividing me from you. That's an us and them. There's also clothing, that's a barrier. And I also talk about being authentic to themselves, because people relate by like people relate as humans. So this is what I like. This is what I don't like. Oh my gosh, I like Arun and I were just talking about Duke basketball because I live in Durham and he went to Duke, and I work a lot with Duke, and that's where we found our human connection that way. So for scientists, what I do is I talk to them about being authentic to themselves and getting to the point of what their research is. Yes, that is so great. We already know that you're super smart. We already know you could be studying this gene on this loci that does this with this protein. That's great, but why should I care? Why should your neighbors care? Why should this person up the street care? You talk about that first. And my pet peeve is when scientists say, I don't want to quote unquote dumb down my science. And I that hits me so hard, because you're not dumbing down your science. And what I normally say is, and I'll ask you, Nicole and Arun, are your moms dumb? Is your dad dumb?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Whatever I ask, is your mom dumb? Is your dad dumb? Is your great grandparents dumb? No, they're not dumb. Everybody is an expert in their own fields. Just because they're not an expert in your field doesn't make them dumb. What you're doing with science communication is you're actually making it accessible. So you need to speak in a way that is accessible to everybody. So you wouldn't build a multi-story building without having an elevator, or you wouldn't have a YouTube video without having captions, because people are going to need it. So why don't you build that into your language? So that's essentially what science communication is that you're making it relatable, you're making it relevant, and you're making it accessible to different populations, because all populations are experts at something. I wish we would call science communication science conversations, because you're speaking with people and not at them. But I can't change the name of the field, but I think that's what scientists need to remember is when you're communicating your science, it's a two-way street. So ask them questions, figure out what your audience cares about, and then dovetail off of that. Maybe they like Marvel videos or Marvel movies. Maybe they like Marvel movies. Guess what? You can make so many analogies and metaphors about what you do for a living and connect it to any Marvel character.
No, I love that. It's we're scientists, of course, but most importantly, we're people, just like everybody else. We're everyday people. I think those are a lot of really important points. And one thing in particular is, the ivory tower that you reflected on, right? Because unfortunately, that is still reality in modern academic scientists. There are plenty of scientists out there who are perfectly happy with being stuck in the ivory tower for the duration of their entire careers. And they make it a point to say, hey, I'm doing my thing, I'm doing my science. I don't really necessarily care that the general public is aware of what I'm doing. I completely disagree with that. You completely disagree with that, of course. I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit more. Why do you think researchers are hesitant to pursue science communication? And I personally think we're obligated to talk about our science to the general public. We are funded by the general public. It's their tax dollars that are enabling us to do our science. So I totally disagree with that notion. But why do you think some researchers are really so satisfied with being stuck in that ivory tower? And how do you draw some of those folks out and get them to be more effective science communicators to the general public?
Right. So that is an excellent question. And I am not a great person to ask how they feel and what's going through their minds, because I don't have that mindset. I am always going to be like, hey, I have information, I'm going to share it with the public. But I do see, and I have worked with dozens of scientists that are really okay with being in that ivory tower and being like, I don't need to do outreach. I do what I do, and this is what I'm good at. And I think a lot of that stems from a couple of things, actually. One, I don't think that they're confident enough to communicate their research because along the way they didn't receive positive feedback on how they were engaging with other people. And also sometimes it's personality. Like there are some super introverts that don't want to talk to people, and that's totally fine. I think people, we all have our own roles in society, and I essentially am like, you do you. If you need help though, let me know, but do whatever you feel comfortable. But I think, back to the list, like I think some of it is confidence, and that they may not feel confident enough to communicate their research to people outside their bubble. And my thing is to overcome that. You don't know unless you try. I think some of it's that, and I think some of it is also the fact that we call these skills soft skills. And I know I can't control like term things, but the fact that we call something soft skills, but they're essential skills. Like we all need to know how to communicate to each other. Like even babies communicate they need to eat. So we all need these skills, but the fact that we categorize them as soft skills does something to us think that it's not as important as these harder skills, like these actual research and tangible skills. But yet the soft skills we use on a daily basis. We have to email on a daily basis. We have to communicate all the time. So I think it's also that. But honestly, I can't speak for the people that are stuck in the ivory tower because I do not have that mindset. But I will say I respect them for their hard work, and everybody has their roles. But I think it's doing them an injustice if they aren't communicating their research, because all of that hard work for nothing. It's like being a chef and making an awesome meal but not sharing it with people, so nobody knows that that meal is delicious.
Mm.
So in order to share what you're doing with the public, when you're able to do that, you get funding, you can get more funding, you can get more community engagement, because maybe you can connect with a citizen science program and get so much more data that way instead of doing it by yourself. Like I think once we start communicating our research to the public, where it opens so many doors for us, funding wise, networking wise, and also just like assistance and support. So there's never going to be a downfall to doing science communication, but I also respect and understand those that don't want to do it.
I think, when well, I think that a lot of scientists were not trained on this, and classically it was, the skill was do your research and do it well. And I think that actually historically scientists were trained in the opposite direction. The more jargon you can use, the smarter you can sound, the more that's actually going to serve you well. What we're seeing now is that there's a flip side to that, which is that policymakers, the general public, people just, if you create that gap between what you're working on and the knowledge about it, then you're going to end up um, continued, with lack of trust and lack of recognition for what you're doing. But I think what we need to understand is, and I'm always saying this on this podcast and elsewhere, that scientists are under a lot of pressure. And in the fact that we expect scientists to be critical thinkers and very, very knowledgeable and be able to lead a lab and be able to get grants and be able to teach university courses and all of these things. And now we're adding on to them. You also need to understand how to communicate to the public. I don't know if that's a realistic expectation for everyone. I think some people are amazing at it. But what I would love to see is more of what you're doing, which is providing the services to bridge that gap if scientists don't necessarily have the time, tools, desire, skills, whatever it is to do it. And instead of saying, okay, then we just won't do it for your science. Like, I think, I think the question in here is, do you see a framework or a role or some sort of more formalized way that we can help? Um, Provide scientists who are reluctant or maybe just need some training,
Yeah,
to be
I
able to
think
do
just
this.
letting folks know that Universal SciCom exists. Like you could have zero experience in science communication or have been doing it all your life. There is a role for you at at Universal SciCom. And you had mentioned the added pressure for scientists to have to literally do everything. It is tough. But I also know a lot of scientists that are excellent in lab, but also excellent science communicators as well. And I recognize how exhausting that must be because they are expected to still collect data and do their research, but then they're always gone because we need you to speak for our lab. And especially if they're minorities, they you always have to be that face of the lab
Mm.
to make them look good. And I really, so for at Universal SciComm, what I'm trying to do is provide a support system for them. And like, maybe let's figure out how you can monetize this, because this is your time and this is your skills. Like, I mean, these are your unique skills that set you apart from the rest of the researchers. So this is like you are double majoring in something. So it's a totally different field, being a researcher and being a science communicator. And a lot of scientists have to do both. And a lot of times they're not compensated for that. So that's why I exist. So I'm trying to find them ways that they can monetize that, or ways that we can uplift them, or provide an outlet with this network so they can get more support. So there might be other scientists that can help them along the way. I know for a lot of my consultants, they have full-time research jobs or full-time science writing jobs, but they help out with Universal SciCom because this is what they find fun. But they also know they can't leave the lab because their research is essential. But they also need this outlet, and they want to share their skills and their gift with other scientists so they can have more support later on. So now there's more microbiologists out there that communicate just like they can, or more marine biologists that communicate. So that's what I do at Universal SciCom, is just provide that support system.
Yeah, amazing support system, amazing resource. I wanted to talk something about perhaps a newish method of science communication, maybe not so new anymore, but social media, right? Social media, digital media. It's so accessible. Anybody can start a whatever social media account you want and become a science communicator in some capacity. And there are some really successful science communicators on, say, Instagram that I follow. In particular, I like Instagram because of the visual element. I think in the short clip style there. But you pick your platform. There's phenomenal science communicators across social media. But for those of us who are, say, academic scientists or even industry scientists, and want to use social media appropriately to kind of expand our science communication outreach or expand our visibility or platform, what are some tips and tricks that we can have, that we can do to really do that effectively. So what advice do you have for folks who are trying to use social media for science communication in the best way?
I would say find a medium in which you are strong at. So maybe you're good at science writing. Okay, well, then you probably should look at the more text based social media like Blue Sky, X. Those are more text based. If you're a scientist in something like marine biology that has amazing pictures, then that would be Instagram. Those visuals will be captivating, and then you can have a little small text that explains it. So really, what I stress that researchers need to do is figure out what they're strong at, and what skills they already have and what they already like to do. Some researchers are like me, already a communicator and loves to be like out in public, and clearly I'm an extrovert. So I would love doing something on TikTok. So and so therefore you would find where your strengths are. Is it writing? Is it pictures? Is it video? And then find your platform that way. The next thing that they need to do is figure out who's their audience. Yes, that's great that you want to be a science communicator, but who do you want to talk to? And you can't say general public, because that is such a wide net that you're going to always ostracize people, because what I think general public is may not be the same as what Arun thinks general public is. So you have to figure out, okay, yes, you want to hit general public, but what does that mean to you? Do you want to hit POCs? Do you want to make sure you reach out to a certain age demographic? Then you figure out where they are. So if you're like, okay, I love images and I really want to reach like a younger demographic, like my group and maybe younger. Well, that's going to be Instagram or any other image based platform where they are. So you meet them where they are, and you use your strengths that you already have to highlight and get people excited about what you do. But yeah, that would be the advice that I would give for scientists that are interested in doing social media.
Yeah, excellent advice. I always say the same thing. Pick your audience and get granular about it. Are you trying to target policymakers? Are you trying to target teachers who are teaching other students? Do you want to actually talk to students or teens, or and because everyone learns differently, is in different places. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. People talk a lot about storytelling and science storytelling. In fact, I was just at a conference and this question came up that said, you know, again, I keep referring to this trust gap in science, and the question to this panelist was, how do we address as scientists the trust gap? And this panelist answer was storytelling, and I was like, okay, I like that word. I love storytelling, but I don't know. Can you expand on that? What does that mean for scientists, and what is good storytelling in science?
Oh, I love that question. So the first thing in storytelling that all scientists need to do is develop their own personal story. And developing your own personal story, or maybe you don't want to use the word story, you can say your personal narrative. This is what you tell people when they meet you, and this humanizes you. So when I share my personal story, I talk about on how I was an athlete, and then I went to undergrad and I majored in like 70 different majors because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But all of these steps resonates with your audience in some way. And when you tell the story correctly, there's been research where they track the feelings and emotions of that storyteller on stage with the feelings and emotions of the listeners in the audience, and they actually overlap. So if you tell the story right, it's engaging and captivating, and your audience will remember it. Now, we aren't all going to start off pros like that, but just by starting to figure out what your personal story is and sharing it, that will help you better connect with your audience because it humanizes you and it makes you relatable. And then they're like, oh, well, this person, I get it because we have this in common. We both know what it's like to live in North Carolina. We know what good barbecue sauce is. And then that human element of it makes that audience listen a little bit more. And then if you're talking about your research or what you do for a living and couching that in a way that is a way to tell a story, then that's what captivates us. We now know, like if you did like a hero's journey. So I do a workshop. I partner with an actor, and he does improv, and we that workshop, it's a boot camp, it's 2 days, and it's science communication essentials along with improv skills. And so we call it one and done. And we talk about the hero's journey and developing that story because we all know the hero's journey. We have all seen Disney movies and Pixar movies. Most movies and most stories that we listen to or watch are in that hero's journey. So if we're able to couch our research in that, that will captivate the audience just like a movie would, or just like a story would. So that it makes it more memorable, and it makes your goals way more clear because you're like, oh, this is it. And then, oh my gosh, it hits this, and this is the obstacle and the conflict. But and then so that keeps everybody on the edge of their seats and engaged. But you may not have that edge of your seat process. But if you do format your how you communicate your research as a story, you can make it engaging and thought provoking and invoke emotion as well. So that is why I also stress being able to share your personal stories with the public to humanize you and figure out how you can share your research with the public as a story as well, because invoking that emotion makes people care about what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everybody has a story to tell. And in fact, one of the things that I love doing the most on the Stem Cell podcast, in addition to, of course, talking about the nitty gritty science, is dissecting everyone's story because, no two scientists got to where they are in the same way. Everybody has a unique background and a unique story to tell. And like what we talked about at the top, it's humanizing the scientists and realizing or uncovering to the public that we're not just scientists, we are people, and storytelling goes a long way in doing that. So we're talking about obviously science communication here, but I also wanted to talk a little bit also about science miscommunication because certainly there's a lot of that going on these days in this climate. We don't have to talk more about the climate, but the miscommunication, and of course, this is really prevalent on social media, like what we alluded to. Anybody can start an X account, anybody can start a social media account, and pretend like they are a knowledgeable scientist or an expert in a certain topic, and accumulate a large following. And unfortunately, if you're loud and if you're personable or whatever, have certain attributes, you can accumulate that following and have influence. And that influence can spread spread into the general public. Journalists can pick up on that, and they may not necessarily understand that this person is not a trained scientist and that doesn't necessarily have an expertise in this topic area. So, as scientists, how do we combat that? Is there a way that to appropriately combat that growing sense of miscommunication that's out there?
Right. That is so difficult because miscommunication is going to travel much faster than accurate communication because it's got that wow factor. And it's hard to combat that when, we're like, our stuff doesn't normally have that wow factor. But there are some things that we can do. So, uh, I tell my scientists if they do see a post that's like that, and that's misinformation, then you post something that is a correction of that. If that's your field and you're able to speak on that. But remember, when you do it, you need to be like short, sweet, and to the point, and making sure that you don't hedge your bets. So that's one of the things that scientists love to do. We don't like to use always or everybody or all these things that would qualify us to say these words. But that's what people care about, though. So when we say something along the lines of, I don't know, most research does this, but only sometimes. You just said all of this stuff that was great, but then you said only sometimes. Just leave that out. You're not lying if you say X, Y, and Z and then period. We get that there's more to it. So to not get hung up in those semantics, just trying to correct it. That's what you're trying to do. So for me, when I train scientists how to communicate to the public, I make sure so I do this whole activity that's called jargon, but in that jargon, I also talk about buzzwords and on how you don't necessarily have to use them because they're fluff and you only have 10 seconds of that person's attention anyway. So why are you going to say this is uh, amazing and groundbreaking and blah blah blah, all of that stuff? You've lost that time. Say the groundbreaking things, say what is interesting. And to make it more honest, what I also teach is when a scientist says, like, they do this all the time when they're at a public event or they're on social media, they always say this is amazing and wonderful and blah blah blah, and it's the most exciting thing ever. But if we're at, say, a festival and you're at a table saying this is amazing and wonderful, I'm at a festival and there's a roller coaster ride. What you're about to tell me better compete with that roller coaster, or I'm not going to trust you anymore. So, what I do is I make them rephrase it. I make them say, oh my gosh, this is so awesome to me. Let me know what you think. Why? Because everybody wants to share their opinion. And I'm not lying to you by saying I think this is awesome and amazing and blah blah blah. What do you think? And then you're going to be like, "Oh, well, I want to see what this is. If you think it's amazing and wonderful, I want to tell you my opinion." So therefore you're creating one conversation. So you could also use this to your benefit in social media as well to help like debunk some of that misinformation that's out there. Misinformation could be out there. And then what you could say is, well, to me, I think that this is fascinating. And then say the fact, and then be like, what do you think? Then you're adding that extra engagement. So whoever just read that misinformation can then will most likely bring that into your conversation. So you're not spamming this popular account and getting attacked over there. You're now creating a safe environment under your own account and addressing those misconceptions.
Absolutely. I have a question that's sort of a follow-up. I think that part of the reason we end up with a lot of miscommunication in science is because science is so nuanced and complex and also so slow moving. And I think in general, people are uh, it's hard to accept nuance. It's hard to be patient, especially when there's really critical outcomes. Somebody's sick or climate change is coming, or is it safe to do a certain thing when there's a global pandemic? And sometimes the answer is we don't know yet, or sometimes, or we've only studied a portion of that. And I think the really tricky thing, and maybe this comes back to what we were talking to earlier around why scientists are can be so hesitant to communicate their science, is because often the answer is not yet. We don't know yet. We're still looking at that. We know pieces of it. It depends on a million different variables. So, how do you advise scientists to communicate the nuance without losing people? Without when people really want a black or white, yes or no, A or B answer, but that's really not doing justice to the science.
Right. And I tell them to briefly explain that. So say it's whether going outside is healthy for you or not. And like, of course, there's all these other variables, like there's sunburn, blah, blah, blah. So let's say you get that question.
Mhm.
I tell my scientists to answer the question because they are looking for a direct answer. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. So answer the question first. Be like, yes, it is very advantageous to go outside. However, we also recognize that there are other things that are going on that for some people that it may not be as healthy to go outside. But overall, resource supports, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. Just keep it short and sweet so they know that, okay, this might change, or there's other aspects of it that might apply to me or might not apply to me. But you know what? They're going to ask because they're going to be like, oh, so what are some aspects that would prevent people from going outside? Because they want to ask about them. They want to know if it's safe for them to go outside. And that's just using a general example. But when you are communicating your research, providing that means of that communication, like I said, making sure you're talking with people and not at them. So answer their question, but then say that may not be applicable to everyone, and then getting them to ask, what do you mean by that? Or getting them to ask, what about if I have X, Y, and Z, if I have a dog, or what if I have a cat? Great. Now it's a conversation. And I know you don't have that opportunity on social media a lot of times, but they will DM you or add to your post. So comment on your post. So there are ways that you can do that. But especially if you're doing it verbally, that's a good way to do it. If you're writing, because a lot of times science writers want to publish a blog and things like that, I always say try not to hedge your bets like that. So you say your fact, and then you can have the small caveat of like, yes, we know that this isn't for everyone, something like that to let them know. But yeah, just say the fact. Like if it's wearing mask, not wear a mask, it's best to wear a mask because in general, it is best to wear a mask. So you could talk about that. So that's how I get them to do it. I have them answer their question first, and then try to create an opportunity for that conversation to take place.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thanks for sharing that. A lot of amazing resources that we're talking about here. On the various Stem Cell Technologies podcasts, I think our predominant listeners are junior folks, trainees, grad students, even some undergrads, postdocs, folks who are really getting started in their careers. And we'd like to tailor a lot of our conversations to them. Not only are they our listeners, but they're perhaps the most vulnerable or most malleable group out there. Those of us at the PI stage later, we're perhaps a bit more not cynical, but established and set in our ways. But the trainees perhaps are much more easily influenced in that way. So this is your chance. This is your chance, Tamara. I mean, for folks who are just starting out, where should they begin if they want to improve their science communication skills, or if they think they're already pretty good? What's a way for them to get even better? Are there certain platforms, training programs? Of course, you have a number of these yourself. Maybe some communities that you recommend they reach out to or get involved with. So for folks who are just getting started in science, how can they get better in communication?
Of course, I'm going to plug Universal SciCom should be the first step that they take if they're interested in doing science communication. If you don't want to go to Universal SciCom and you just want to jump into it and try it out, I would say once again, figure out what you want to do. Is it science writing? Is it science communication verbal? Is it verbal? Is it written? Who's your audience? And then try it and connect with different community members. If you want to talk to policy members, great. Talk to your local government, talk to your local policymakers in your area and figure out what tools do they need. And then you can work directly with them so you can learn your SciComm skills from them because it's going to be very specific to science policy. But yeah, that would be my advice. If you want to do science communication, there is nothing stopping you. Go ahead and give it a try. And sometimes it's trial and error. You're not going to be perfect at it. You just have to start somewhere and try not to stand in your own way. And so you try it, get your feedback, and adjust accordingly. You're not going to be perfect right off the bat.
Awesome. I'm going to wrap up with one last question because we're almost at time here. But I'm wondering if you can give us your favorite example of science communication, whether it's your favorite science communicator or a book that you've read or some TED Talk, whatever it is, and why you thought it was like super well done, and what what people could take away from that is like, that is how to
Oh,
do it.
that's such a good question. This is something I actually haven't really thought about. Oddly enough, because I don't get this question often. So nice question. But the first person that came to mind when you were listing it, like as a good example, was so it's in 2020. She's still doing this, and I'm trying to think of her name. Ah, there, the Black Forager. I remember, I'll never forget. In 2020, she started making these TikToks, and I think the first one I saw was like the acorn, whether it's good to eat or bad to eat. She put it in water and you see that it floats and doesn't float. And then now you could tell, like, if you watch her earlier videos and you watch her videos now, like the still it's still similar in that great communication skills, making it applicable to people, but she refined them over time. So she didn't start off perfect, but she is now doing an excellent job. But I think that was awesome. When I saw her videos, and even when I see the new ones now, because one, it's awesome representation. Two, she is showing that Black people can go out and forage, and also showing that everybody can go out and forage. But a lot of times there's that stereotype that people of color don't go outside, that whole thing. So she's debunking that, and there were so many levels that what she was doing to like there's so many levels to what she is doing just by doing the thing that she is passionate about. So that's what I mean. You never know how you're going to impact your community or anyone just by being who you are and being authentic to who you are and doing what you're passionate about. It's going to resonate with somebody. So what she does is, like, she talks about foraging and what you can eat out in your backyard. Who does not who doesn't want to know what you can eat outside? I want to know what I can eat outside.
Especially in 2020. I mean, we didn't know in 2020 if we were going to need to forage for
Right.
ourselves. So excellent.
And even now, like, she's still going making her foraging videos, and they're just so great. And then she even goes back now into her kitchen and makes it in front of us, so it's really cool that you see the whole process. So yeah, when I saw that in 2020, and I was like, immediately I was like, that's a great visual, nice job. And she talked about why we care, and she just talked about why it floats and why it doesn't, because there's, I think, a weevil, but I just know that there's a worm inside, and that's why it's happening. So it was so much that she covered in so little time, just with the visuals. And that's also something I always talk to my scientists about, is making sure power of images and visuals is huge. But she was able to do all of that, especially during 2020 when we were all just inside watching all the things, yeah, on TikTok. And then what she's doing now is just amazing. So yeah, I've never met her or anything else like that, but I just think what she's doing is amazing. And I think she's a really good example of what you can do with science communication.
Well, for not for giving you a curveball there, you certainly came up with a good response. So I'll have to. I'm not on TikTok, but maybe I'll go check it out. Tamara, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an amazing conversation from one science communicator to another. Thank you for everything you do for scientists. I wish you all the very best at Universal SciCom.
Thanks so much for having me, and I really enjoyed this. So thank you so much.
That brings us to the end of our show. Don't forget to sign up for our email list at www.labcoatsandlifepodcast.com to get show notes, episode summaries, and links to useful information. Or learn more about STEM mentorship via the resources found at www.stemcell.com/labcoatsandlife. You can also reach out to us on X via STEMCELL at STEMCELLTech, or by email at info@labcoatsandlifepodcast.com with feedback or to suggest guests.